Welcome to the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast with our co-hosts Don McKinnon and Eric Malloy, where we look at church revitalization in real time.
Hey everybody, it's Don McKinnon from the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast, and I just wanted to send this out because during this recording of this podcast, we recorded close to 2 hours of discussion, and we just decided that it would be best to divide this into 3 separate podcasts. So we hope you enjoy this. This got into some heated debate between Eric and myself, but I think it shows that while we're both on the same page in certain things, our individuality shows up on other things. Hope you enjoy this. Hope this finds you. Hope it really informs you on different things going on. It's supposed to be the 10 trends or 10 movements within church revitalization right now. And what ended up happening is, as we discussed this, certain topics took longer. In fact, the next episode is on number 4, which is just what we're calling the millennial answer. So just hang on with us over the next 3 podcasts, and we'll get back with some fresh stuff right after. All right, God bless.
And okay, welcome to episode 4 of the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Don McKinnon, and I am here with my podcast co-host
Eric Malloy from First Church in Charlestown. I always feel like I need to say something else. I mean, like, really, like, you say everything, and I'm like, am I just supposed to insert my name here? It's kind of awkward.
Yeah.
So,
hey, it's only episode 4. You know, this is just going to get better as we go along. But I am Don McKinnon. I am pastor of First Baptist Church of Sutton. We are both within that grand 5 to 6 year spot of church revitalization. Eric is getting ready to head into his 4th year. He's almost 3 years into this. I am almost a year into mine. And you know what? We will both tell you that it is a joy and a privilege to be called to do this. And you know what? God is just awesome in how he uses revitalizations. We are doing this live time, or how did we call this? Real time. So in other words, for those of you, if this is the first episode you're listening to, because we're not there, a lot of when you hear about church revitalization, you'll hear from guys that have been there and cut their teeth and been there through the sweat and tears, and now they're enjoying and reaping the benefits and fruit that come from spending all that time in there. We're here at ground zero, basically, putting our time and our energy and our effort into the whole church revitalization of our respective churches. But we're not there. We're not, my church could close tomorrow. Eric's church could close tomorrow. But in truth, we are here, and we think that it's beneficial for you to hear what goes on in church revitalization as it goes on. And we're going to be talking about things like today. We're going to be talking about movements in church revitalization. We were going to call it trends, but my podcast partner here does not like that word.
I'm not a fan. I hate that word.
So we decided, we were like, okay, what could we call this? And during the time that we were writing up what these episodes were going to be, I sent him the word movements. And it's funny because then when I checked trends for synonyms, movement was one of the synonyms. So
I'm just not a fan of the word. Like, it just sounds like you're trying to be like the next cool big thing. You know, like, man, I'm not going to go there. I changed my mind. I'm not. I'm gonna leave that one alone.
And just so if you're joining us for the first time, Eric will speak his mind from time to time, and he doesn't care who he runs over while doing it.
Occasionally to my own detriment.
Yes.
So
I'm the governor to his wanting to be what he wants to say. But
we're all a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
I have a good friend who says it well. Progress, not perfection. So that's I've gotten better. How about we say that the Lord has softened me to this point.
Yes, and of course we're not going to be perfect until we get to heaven anyway. So, but again, this episode we're going to be focusing on movements in church revitalization, and so we're going to have here 10 things leading the charge towards church revitalization in American churches. Now, just for not to repeat ourselves over the last few episodes, but church revitalization is something that really is picking up steam over the last 5 years, but it's something that's been around for a decade or two, possibly 3 if you can really go back that much. There are cases out there. There are books written. Jim Cymbala wrote a book, Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire. He talks. He really is a revitalizer when you think of it, because here he is. He's pastoring, and he took over the Brooklyn Tabernacle, and they were meeting in a bingo hall or something. I forget what it was, and 17 people, and now they're one of the largest churches in New York City.
I saw him speak in a conference. Those of you guys who haven't caught it, you know how probably
you went to a conference.
You know what? It's when I was a planter and they flew me down for free. So it's my kids were little, and we just kind of considered it a kind of a baby vacation. So
just so you know, Eric hates going to conferences.
I think hate's a strong word.
I
strongly dislike going to conferences. It's just not my thing. It's just, I don't know. It's just not my thing. I like being at home. I like going to my house, sitting in my chair, and if I want to do it, I'm going to watch it. Anyways,
I'm surprised in this day and age, and I'm saying this because when Driscoll was doing the Resurgence, I remember going and sitting down and watching the Resurgence, streaming it from my computer to my TV, and watching like R12 and R13 that way.
Right.
I didn't have the money to fly out there, or the time to fly out there and do that, or the resources. But it's one of those things. I'm surprised that we don't have, like, that's not going to be the way pastors try to. And this actually kind of goes with our theme, but the way the pastors try to keep up with the trends of the generations, I'm surprised that hasn't become like the thing. Like, you're going to have to spend $20 to get the code to go online. Of course, now I'm saying this, and I bet you somebody's going to take it. So we're going to say copyright.
Right. This is our idea.
2018.
I went to a friend's church. And I watched a conference. I won't mention the name because I'm not sure I 100% agree. So I'm not going to say the name. Maybe I'll tell you offline at some point. But we watched the conference at his church like that. I mean, it wasn't really. I went with my wife and kids, and they were bored out of their mind. So, but we didn't stick around. We watched like one session of it. So, yeah, no, you look at these. And they are some. Anyways, where I was going, I saw Jim Cymbala in a conference, and he was very engaging, very entertaining. There was a book that was one of my honorable mentions from our last podcast that was written in '86 about outgrowing the ingrown church, and so that tells you it's been around. That's 30 years ago now. So, like 32 years ago.
Yeah.
Sorry, math teacher precision there, but So let's take a look at these 10 movements in church revitalization. I'll go with the first one because this is something that's probably near and dear to our heart as we work with Overseed locally. It's smaller local networks. That large networks hold a once in a year conference that many of us can't get to. I mean, you and I are both bivocational.
Yep.
So even if I was excited to go to a conference, I'm not. I couldn't go because I have to work. I those of you that know, I'm a high school teacher, and so getting time off in the middle of the school year is basically non-existent. Mm-hmm. And there's never conferences that happen in the summertime because everybody's out of town. So that's the case. And then smaller networks, we can hold conferences in states. And possibly do more than one a year, and helps bring encouragement to pastors by hearing the voice of fellow pastors in our own area. Actually, I attended one with Overseed a few years ago that was an overnight conference up in New Hampshire, which was really good.
Yeah, and like when I was getting introduced to Overseed and Jim, it was a local pastor by the name of John Lloyd, who he took a small church that was actually in Easton. We talked about the different types of revitalization. One of them is relocation. He relocated that church from Southeastern and moved it to Taunton. And basically that church has grown to a church that holds 3 services, 1 on Saturdays, 2 on Sundays, and just really, it's something that's still near and dear to John's heart. Now, he's no longer pastor there. He moved away last year out to San Francisco to be close to his grandkids. Huh. And he took another church out there that needed a revitalization. So, again, where I say it's near and dear to his heart, but he was the one that actually introduced me to the idea of revitalization. And so I actually went to a conference that they held with Overseed at their old building that they had in Taunton. They actually sold the one in Easton, bought an old congregational church in Taunton, and then outgrew that. I mean, they really outgrew that.
That's awesome.
They built their own facility, and they've kept the old building just because it still can be used. They actually have a Portuguese service that meets in that building.
That's great.
So, when we also talk about reaching your community, they know that Taunton has a Portuguese community, and so they reach that area. But, yeah, small networks are really growing in number. We talked about, even in the larger networks, the Gospel Coalition is doing these small town summits here in New England. They have regional networks now, too. The second movement we're seeing within churches for church revitalization is larger multi-site churches are turning into individual churches. And this is something we talked about, how sometimes acquisitions is a way that churches become, living again. And so we have some examples, like last year, the Village Church with Matt Chandler and Christ the Redeemer with Tim Keller, they both made these public announcements that within the next few years, their campuses are going to become autonomous, independent churches. So that means that there's no longer going to be Village Church, which I think has 8 campuses. It's going to be
8 different churches.
Yeah, and one of them will be Village Church, but the other ones are going to be autonomous.
Well, one of the examples of that is when Mars Hill failed. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say failed, and that's a bad term. But with the whole fallout with Driscoll and Mars Hill, you guys aren't familiar with that, happened in 2014?
Yeah, it was like 2013, 2014.
Yeah, that happened, and those all became autonomous, independent churches. So,
Yeah, I think it was like the 3. There were 3. I don't know if it was the 3 newest ones or the 3 that were meeting in the high schools or local schools. One. Yeah, they didn't stay independent, but they were a group that would buy their buildings, buy old churches or buy old storefronts or whatever, and convert these into churches. And so they became pretty much, for the most part, all autonomous.
Right. So that's I've shared before. I'm not a huge proponent of multi-site churches. It's not my I'm not a big fan of the celebrity pastor. I mean, you see some ways it's happened poorly. Which I guess if you go multi-site, independent pastor, live pastor preaching all of them, I'll compromise with you on that one. But the simulcast, I'm not a big fan. I struggle with it.
I mean, I understand the principle of how it's supposed to work. I just think that having the guy that's up there speaking via either a DVD that they throw into the machine, or closed circuit, or however they're doing this, it just, they have a campus pastor, but to me, I just can't understand it. And I mean, that's us,
right?
So
it's not a gospel issue.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. It's not a gospel issue. I'm not saying they're not Christians or they're in sin or anything. It's just not. It's not my thing.
Yeah, it's not the way God's wired us.
Yeah, it's not my thing. I don't.
And just so people listening understand, both of us have friends that are pastors of multi-site churches, so it's not like we're bad-mouthing them or anything. We love those guys, and God's just gifted them different than they've gifted us. So,
right.
I'm sure they'd sit and try to explain it to us.
I'm all sure. I mean, and I'm pro network. I'm pro, whatever, with campuses of the church. But I don't know. It's hard to explain. Like the celebrity pastor, the one guy preaches at 10 different sites. It seems like it always ends badly. And so I think, like, I'm with you. I think there's something to be said about the guy in front of you who preaches being the guy who pastors your church. And so And I
think that's what Chandler and Keller have seen. They're in this list of celebrity pastors, but I think they've kind of seen that writing on the wall, that if they were to stay, what's going to happen to the church that they've built.
Right.
And we shouldn't say the church that they built, but the church that God's built through them.
Right.
So, that's something that I think really speaks about where we are.
And I have a great Matt. I mean, kind of an aside. Maybe we can cut this out later. Who knows? I have a great Matt Chandler story. I was at a conference in Texas, and our little crew that we ended up hanging out with, some friends and then a friend we met. We were talking about how it'd be cool to be able to go to Chandler's church. Go to Flower Mound. So the church that was hosting the conference, we got up and went to their early service. And we had to stand outside at a booth since we were there with NAM. And then, so we're all like looking at our watches and we're like, how early can we cut out of here? And so the guy who was running my booth is a good friend of mine, is a mentor of mine. And I was like, hey, I want to go visit this other church. When can I cut out? And he's like, dude, go whenever you want. So we were just waiting on the other folks to be able to go. So we run to our car, race across Texas, which, if you've ever ridden in the car with me, like I think I should have been a Formula One driver. Like any excuse I have to drive with some speed, I like to take advantage of. So we get across. I drop everybody off because I'm trying to find parking at the Flower Mound campus, and they turn people away at the door, like a nightclub. Like they're like, "Sorry, we're out of seats." Like that's the craziest thing ever. Anyways, I digress. After the service, we're asking a million questions. I turn a corner and I about run into Matt Chandler, which is impressive because he's very tall, thin, like a wiry guy. Like I feel like the videos don't always do him justice. Anyway, so we stand there and chat for a minute. And you ever been to a church? And I've done it. So I'm not shooting anybody at anybody. You ever been to a church where the pastor kind of big times you? You know what I'm talking about? Like where he's shaking your hand, but he's looking over his shoulder like, who else should I be talking to?
Yep.
Kind of thing. So I run into Matt Chandler, and all of my friends laugh because I'm a little bold. And I'm just like, hey, what's going on? My name's Eric. I'm like, whatever. This dude puts his pants on like I do, right? Hey, I'm Matt. I'm like, really, man? Like, I know you're Matt. So we commenced to have a conversation. Hey, man, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Washington. Oh, man, I was born in Washington. I was pastor in Washington at the time. Apparently, that's where Chandler was born. He actually knew the little small town we were from. So we had a nice little conversation kind of about the village, about about our church. Meanwhile, his wife's standing there. It's his last service of the day. I'm sure he's ready to go home. Anyways, the big lesson I learned was Chandler was present. I mean, so here is a celebrity pastor. Dude could have big-timed the crap out of me and was just engaged, not looking around. I mean, I'm doing hand motions, which doesn't really do any good since you're listening. But he's very, very engaged, very like, hey, I'm here with you kind of thing. And I just remember it was very convicting for me. I was like, how many times have I looked over people's shoulders? Like, who else should I be talking to kind of thing? Anyways, so then when you hear that from that conversation I had, which seemed very genuine, he introduces me to his wife. Hi, Lauren, how's it going? My name's Eric, which I'm sure they have no idea who I am from Adam at this point. But I was like, here's a guy, 14,000 people in attendance, and makes the time to like have a conversation with a guy who's visiting his church who can't come back. Like, I'm not a member. There's no chance that next week I'm going to be at your church again. I'm flying home 2 days, several days later. But here he is. Hey man, how's it going? Good to meet you. Hey, what's going on? Kind of thing. Hey, take anything you need. If you guys want to come back later and talk to our staff it'd be great to have you. I don't know what your schedule looks like. And so I just thought, man, so to hear that him, hey, listen, we to make it personal. You're like, even from my one exchange from him, you can kind of sense that. Yeah. So anyway, so that's my Chandler story. Gangly guys like long limb. You're talking about kind of spindly like spider. Anyways, I digress. But it was a good learning experience. So number 3, seminaries and networks are developing replanting and revitalization areas. We've kind of talked about this. Seminaries are now kind of talking about this. I mean, remember the big thing was church planting. It still is, and it's important. Like, mind you, I come from a church planting background. You come from a church planting background. I don't want to take away from church planting. I don't want to say church planting is unimportant. I don't want to say revitalization or church planting. I want to say revitalization and church planting. Both of them are important. But I think it's cool that seminaries and networks are now kind of starting to see the importance of going into established historic churches and revitalizing and replanting and growing. And
it's like I look at last episode when we were talking about the books, one of my books that I had on there was Biblical Church Revitalization, which is a required book now with Southern Seminary. And so this is something that a lot of seminaries, churches, denominations, networks are seeing as, okay, when you look at the number of churches that are plateauing and declining in America, it's really, why are we planting more churches? And again, nothing against church planting, but in a lot of cases, church plants go for the prime area. Like, they'll go for a place off the interstate to really try to attract a lot of people. But then that takes a church, that's in a city here like Boston, or in a town like Sutton, and takes away from a place where they could be growing or they could be reaching. And sadly, and I'm not saying it's all church planters, but we've both been around long enough that we've heard, I don't want to say the attitude, but there seems to be in certain circles this idea of, well, if they're not coming, then we don't want them. Which is basically like they're trying to get butts in seats, but the people that they are hurting are the ones that are in these dying and dead churches. They don't want to go because they're not attracted to that style, but nobody's there. And what happens when these churches close? A lot of these people aren't going to go back to a church. Right. If there are churches that are closing, and I mean, we look at the Catholic Church right now, what they do with a lot of their parishes, they try to consolidate a lot of these churches within the
We've
cities.
Experienced that here in Charlestown.
Yeah.
At one point we had 3. We're down to 2. and one of them they just actually sold the property and they're going to put a Dollar Tree in. So it's you can see that. So yeah, I mean I think there should be a better. It feels like sometimes in these networks, I'm going to pick my words carefully here, that it's almost like there's the church planting circle and there's the established church circle, but there's no overlap.
Yeah.
As opposed to when a church planter comes into a community to kind of be like, hey, what's going on with the established churches? How can I connect with you? How do we conquer this? How do we work alongside each other? It's almost like you guys aren't really getting the job done. So we're the Navy SEALs of the church world that we're going to come in and take care of business for you. And I'm not saying that's all church planners. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is sometimes there is a bit of that, like, hey,
And one thing that also happens in that is you get this attitude of us versus them.
Right.
And that's where, like, and I've seen that in my own church where we have people that hear, oh, there's a new pastor, and they come in to see what's going on, and the people that have been there are like, well, are they here just to spy, just to, like there's this thing because they're so hurt over the other churches, what's going on in the other churches, that these other churches have picked their bones almost clean, and can they trust those people?
When we planted back in Washington, one of the things somebody encouraged me to do was to contact the local pastors from the denomination we were part of, and attempt to build a relationship with them. Hey man, just wanted to sit down and talk to you, kind of let you know what we're doing and why we're not here to compete with you. Like that's not my goal, right? And what's cool about that is through that I actually developed some good relationships with several pastors. One in particular, he at their church's 50th anniversary. It's on the West Coast, so it's he actually invited our church to come be part of it. He was like, yeah, he set up a booth so people know that you guys are here. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, how great of a partnership is that? He's basically like, hey, listen, that's the case. And then we did baptisms in the middle of their 50th anniversary celebration. We baptized people. How much better? And then to me, I go, how great of a legacy are you as a pastor that you can say, hey, listen, we want to support this church plant that's coming, that's happening. And we want you guys to see what's going on in our community, how God is working in this community. We had another church that we partnered with who actually ended up becoming a merger with another church who we rented space from them, and we did our youth group at their church. We did, this was exhausting. We did 4 services in 3 days over Christmas Eve. We had several hundred people come through. But the church, our normal space wasn't available for a couple of those nights. So we actually partnered with the church where our youth group was meeting, and we did worship and Christmas Eve services with them.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is that I think sometimes we don't understand how similar replanting, pastoring, and church planting is. I actually there's a podcast. I think it's an iMarks podcast. It's an iMarks podcast. Church planners aren't entrepreneurs; they're pastors, and that's something I think that all of us need to remember. That's sometimes some of my issue with networks at times is they treat, you're like, oh, you're entrepreneurial. That's not my job. My job isn't to be an entrepreneur. My job isn't to reinvent the wheel. My job is to faithfully preach the gospel.
Right.
And see people come to Christ. So there comes some of my frustration at times with larger networks, with denominational kind of stuff, with trends, is because we try to reinvent the wheel when ultimately we're all pastors, church planners, missionaries, revitalizers, established church. We're all pastors. That's we got to remember that we're not business people. We're not entrepreneurs. I don't have a cooler product than the church down the street. We're all sharing Jesus. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So
and I mean, I'm kind of in that thing of trying to connect with pastors locally in the Sutton area. Because of the reputation that the previous pastor left, here comes this new pastor, and it's like I'm trying to reach out to pastors, and nobody's like answering. Like I did get a nice. I did have coffee and connected with the executive pastor of one of the large churches in Sutton. And it was even though my church is kind of like, well, that's they can't. It's the type of church that nobody from my church is going to go to.
Right.
And it's not saying that it's a bad church, but the executive pastor was really great, cordial, wanted to connect, wanted to, how can we help you? He was like, when I told him that we had painting, he was like, is there a way we can send people to help paint and stuff? But because of the hurt and everything that my flock has had, if I were to open that up and even just talking to them, it goes back to that, well, they're just going to spy on us. They're just, so, I mean, it goes back to what Mark Clifton talks about when he says having tactical patience. It's like, yes, here is a church that wants to connect with us, wants to help, and I've heard them say, the pastor of the church has said at a conference that I went to, he said, our goal is to not just be one church that's reaching the Worcester area, because that's out where Sutton is the second largest city in Massachusetts. But his thing was, we want to see all churches reaching that, have a goal to reach. And if we can help one another, that's what needs to happen.
Well, we're kind of getting off here, but that's fine.
We'll just cut this into 2 episodes.
That's what we're going to have to do. So I got to be honest with you. I struggle reaching with other pastors because I'm a bit contentious, as we've joked about. It's weird because even as a pastor, I don't know if I want to put this on recording. People bug me. Like I have a hard time getting along. Like not just pastor. Like I'm like, oh yeah, but I've made the joke. I don't like most pastors. Pastors bug me. But people, I kind of have a hard time sometimes with people bugging me too. I mean, I'm a little contentious. I like to hole up in my own house and hide. And so I don't network with pastors necessarily incredibly well, just simply because of some of that, that baggage that I feel like we carry at times. And so I tend to not. That's probably why I avoid that kind of stuff, but I have enjoyed the smaller networks, like we talk about here, and being able to connect like that. And so for me, I guess the network's developing this, almost affinity group, so to speak, of revitalization and replanters is kind of nice.
Yeah.
And it's felt a little more comfortable for someone like me who's not as, social.
Yeah.
And friendly. So, hopefully that didn't sound too bad. I love you guys.
Once you get to know him, he's a big softy. So this ends the first part of our 10 movements within church revitalization. We hope you've enjoyed it. Please come back in 2 weeks for the next installment, which will be another lively discussion between Eric and myself. We hope you enjoy it. God bless. The Practical Church Revitalization podcast is sponsored by Overseed. Overseed's vision is to see growing historic churches in every New England town reaching their communities for Christ. If you want to be part of a mentorship program and you live in the New England area, please go to overseed.org and find out how you can get in contact with one of the hub churches in the area or one of the many pastoral network cohorts that are run in the area. Once again, go to overseed.org for more information on the Overseed Network.